Right now, in the next 60 seconds, someone somewhere is going to lose access to their bank account. Not because a hacker sat in a basement for 3 years running a supercomputer against their password. Not because they picked something silly like password 123. They're going to lose it because of a company they've never even heard of. One they signed up for a free trial with back in 2019 and forgot about, got breached 8 months ago. And their password from that random trial, it's the exact same one they use for their email, their banking app, and their Instagram. That's it. That's the whole story. No genius hacking, no movie-style code cracking on a green terminal screen, just one leaked password and a bit of copy-paste. And here's what's going to make you uncomfortable. You've probably been told your whole life that a strong password is the answer. Capital letter, a couple of numbers, a symbol at the end, maybe swap an A for an I because that feels clever. You did all of that. You felt good about it. You felt protected. And I need to tell you, gently but honestly, that feeling is a trap. It's the digital equivalent of putting a state-of-the-art lock on your front door while leaving your back window wide open. The lock isn't the problem. It never was. So today we're going to tear down everything you think you know about password safety, walk through exactly how people actually get hacked in the real world, and by the end of this, you'll have a system you can set up this weekend that will make you safer than about 95% of everyone online. Let's get into it. Let's talk first about the villain everyone loves to imagine, the brute force attack. You've seen it in movies. A hacker's screen fills up with rapid-fire password guesses, numbers, and letters, spinning like a slot machine until finally it lands on the right combination, and a big green "access granted" flashes on screen. It's dramatic. It's also, for almost every regular person reading this, basically fiction. Here's the actual math, and I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. If your password is a simple 6-digit number like a PIN, there are exactly 1 million possible combinations, running from 0 up to 9999999. A machine that's optimized for guessing could burn through every single one of those in a blink. That's the scenario people picture when they imagine getting hacked. So the instinct is obvious. Make it longer, throw in weird characters, make it a nightmare to guess. And on pure math alone, that instinct isn't wrong. A password that's 40 characters long, mixing upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. I would take multiple supercomputers working together longer than the current age of the universe to crack through brute force. That's not an exaggeration for effect. That's the actual math of combinatorics. Even something far more modest. An 8-character password using that same mix would take a single computer several 100,000 years to crack by guessing alone. Throw 1,000 machines at it working in parallel, and you're still looking at a century or two. Scale that up to 100,000 machines running around the clock, and you finally get down to something like 1 to 2 years, which sounds almost achievable, until you remember something important. Absolutely nobody is dedicating 100,000 machines to break into your Hulu account. Here's the detail that tends to surprise people the most. A password made of just 15 random letters, no numbers, no symbols, nothing exotic, just plain lowercase letters strung together with zero pattern, is already, for all practical purposes, mathematically unbreakable through brute force. 15 ordinary letters. That's it. So if the math works out that cleanly, why does the hacked story keep happening to regular people over and over again? Because online brute force attacks are, for the average person, basically a myth. And the reason comes down to something most people never think about: rate limiting. Every time you try to log into a real platform, your email provider, your bank, your social media, there's a built-in delay working against rapid guessing. Sometimes it's barely noticeable, a fraction of a second. After a handful of failed attempts, that delay stretches out, sometimes to several seconds between tries. And all that beautiful, terrifying brute force math we just walked through, it assumes an attacker can try a new password roughly every single millisecond. Real-world login systems are nowhere close to that fast. Once you add realistic delays, the numbers stop being scary and start being almost comical. Then, stack on attempt limits. Serious platforms lock an account after 10 failed tries, sometimes fewer. Some lock you out for a full day. Some freeze the account entirely until you go through identity verification. And on top of all of that, you've likely got two-factor authentication standing guard, meaning even a hacker who somehow nails your exact password still needs a one-time code sent to your phone or your inbox before they're actually in. Any hacker who understands what they're doing looks at that wall, rate limits, lockouts, two-factor, and simply walks away. They're not burning years of computing power to break into your Spotify account. There's a door sitting wide open just a few feet away, and it doesn't require any cracking at all. So here's the part of the story that almost nobody actually sits down and explains properly. The single biggest source of hacked accounts on the planet isn't brute force. It isn't some elite hacking operation either. It's something almost embarrassingly simple. Data breaches from companies you already trust. Combined with one habit, millions of people share without thinking twice about it. There's a website called Have I Been Pwned? You can go there right now, type in your main email address, and see for yourself. Statistically, there's roughly a 90% chance your email shows up on that list. Not because you did anything careless, not because your password was weak, but because a company you trusted with your information got breached and your data went along for the ride. Think about the names that have made headlines over the years. Massive platforms, household names, companies with entire security teams whose full-time job is preventing exactly this. And they still got breached. When that happens, what typically leaks isn't just usernames, it's full pairs. Your email address sitting right next to whatever password you used on that specific platform. That pairing is now sitting in a database somewhere, quietly changing hands in corners of the internet you and I will never see. And what do the people trading that data actually do with it? Something almost insultingly low effort. They take that email and password combination and try it everywhere else. Your bank, your main email account, every major platform they can think of, one attempt each. No guessing games, no waiting around for a machine to grind through possibilities. Just a simple question, does this same login work here too? And far too often, the answer is yes, because of the single most dangerous habit in all of digital security, password reuse. Using that same password, or some barely disguised variation of it, across multiple accounts. This, not complexity, is the actual vulnerability sitting at the center of almost every hacking story you've ever heard. Once one platform gets breached, every other place where you use that same password becomes an unlocked door. One breach doesn't just compromise one account, it cascades. 10 accounts become 20. 20 become however many services you've ever signed for using that one convenient, memorable password. In this scenario, your password's complexity is completely beside the point because nobody had to guess it. They already had it handed to them. Now pair that with a second major attack method and the full picture snaps into focus: phishing. Phishing is exactly what it sounds like. Someone tricks you into believing a link is legitimate. You click it, you land on a page that looks exactly like your bank's login screen or your email provider's site. You type in your credentials without thinking twice, and just like that, everything you typed belongs to someone else now. The overwhelming majority of these attacks, somewhere between 80 and 90%, arrive through email or text message, a fake shipping notification, a fake account verification request, a fake unusual login detected, click here to secure your account message, which is almost cruelly ironic given what it's actually doing. It looks real, it feels urgent. You click, you type, and it's over in seconds. Your password's complexity meant nothing in that moment because you handed it over voluntarily, believing you were protecting yourself. There's an even sharper, more unsettling version of this called spear phishing. Instead of a generic mass email, someone builds an attack specifically around you, using personal details pulled from a previous data breach, your name, your address, maybe partial account numbers. They call you directly, and because they already know real details about your life, they sound completely legitimate, convincingly official. They ask you to confirm a PIN or read out a verification code, and because the whole interaction feels so personal and informed, people comply. So let's set one hard rule right now, and I want you to actually remember this one. If anyone calls you claiming they need access to your accounts or your devices, no matter how official they sound, no matter how much personal information they seem to have, hang up, every time. No exceptions. So now that you actually understand the real mechanics behind how people lose access to their accounts, leaked databases, password reuse, and phishing, we can finally build a strategy that defends against what's actually happening instead of the Hollywood version that never really applied to you in the first place. And the good news is, the real solution is far less exhausting than what most security experts have been telling you for years. Step 1, and this part is non-negotiable. Start completely fresh. Treat every password you've ever used, no matter how long or clever it seemed, as already compromised. Assume it's sitting in a leaked database somewhere right now because, statistically, there's a real chance it already is. Carrying an old password forward into your new secure system defeats the entire purpose, no matter how many symbols you crammed into it. Wipe the slate clean. Now let's talk about how you actually build passwords worth keeping. And this next part might surprise you because it goes against almost everything the internet has told you about password strength. The most secure, genuinely practical format isn't some chaotic string of symbols and numbers that you can barely type without hitting backspace 5 times. It's simply a chain of random, unrelated words. Not a phrase that means something to you. Nothing tied to your dog's name, your birth year, or your favorite team. Completely random words strung together with no logical connection between them, so there's no pattern for anyone, human or machine, to exploit. For your most important accounts, aim for 6 random words strung together. You can separate them with spaces, dashes, or periods, whatever feels natural to type quickly. A passphrase built this way typically lands somewhere between 28 and 35 characters long, which puts it firmly into essentially uncrackable territory under any realistic brute force scenario. It's long enough to be mathematically serious, but readable enough that you can actually type it without staring at the keyboard like it's a foreign language. This 6-word format is reserved for your highest stakes accounts. Your primary email address sits at the very top of that list. And here's why that matters more than people realize. Email is the master key to your entire digital life. If someone gets into your inbox, they can trigger password resets on almost everything else you own. Email isn't just another account among many, it's the gateway that guards all the others. Give it a 6-word passphrase that you never, under any circumstances, reuse anywhere else. Apply that same 6-word standard to your banking apps, your Apple or Google account, and anything protecting sensitive offline material, like an encrypted archive or your home Wi-Fi network. These are the accounts where a breach carries real, lasting consequences, so they earn the strongest protection available, and none of them should ever share a passphrase with anything else, including each other. Now here's where most advice online completely falls apart, because it ignores how people actually live. You don't have 6 accounts. You probably have somewhere between 50 and 300, scattered across social media, streaming platforms, shopping sites, gaming accounts, random forums you signed up for once and forgot about. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is realistically going to memorize a unique 6-word passphrase for every single one of those. Try to force that on yourself and you'll abandon the whole system within 2 weeks, sliding right back into old habits. So here's the practical middle ground that actually survives contact with real life. Sort your lower stakes accounts into a small number of buckets based on category. Social media goes into one bucket, streaming and gaming go into another, shopping and general browsing sites go into a third. For each bucket, create a 4-word passphrase, brand new words, never used anywhere else in your life, and use that single passphrase across every account inside that specific bucket, and only that bucket. Yes, technically, this is a form of reuse. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but it's contained deliberate reuse with a clear boundary drawn around it. If your streaming bucket gets compromised because one gaming site had sloppy security, the damage stops right there at the edge of that bucket. Your social media stays untouched because it's protected by a completely different passphrase. Your banking stays untouched. Your shopping accounts stay untouched. The cascading one breach becomes 20 breaches disaster that destroys people who reuse the same password everywhere simply can't happen here because you've built walls between the buckets. 4 random words per category, never crossing over between buckets, starting completely fresh from today forward. Let's shift to something you touch dozens of times a day without thinking about it: how you unlock your phone. Between PIN codes, pattern swipes, fingerprint scanning, and facial recognition, fingerprint tends to be the strongest practical option for daily use. And here's a detail that surprises most people when they hear it. Your phone doesn't actually store a photograph of your fingerprint anywhere. It converts your fingerprint into a mathematical representation locked inside a dedicated secure chip, and that mathematical data cannot realistically be reverse engineered back into a usable image of your actual print. The privacy fear a lot of people carry around fingerprint scanning simply doesn't match how the technology actually works under the hood. Facial recognition tells a slightly different story because it's built on the geometry of your face, and those measurements exist in a form that's technically more accessible than fingerprint data. PIN codes and pattern locks are perfectly fine as backups, but they carry one simple, old-fashioned risk. Anyone standing nearby can watch you type it and simply remember what they saw. Fingerprint sidesteps that particular weakness entirely. One thing worth genuinely knowing, though, in certain countries and legal jurisdictions, law enforcement can compel you to unlock a device using your biometrics in situations where they legally cannot compel a PIN. If you're crossing international borders or entering a situation where that distinction actually matters to you, it's worth temporarily switching back to a PIN. And while we're looking toward the future of all this, it's worth mentioning Passkeys, because they're quickly becoming a real, working alternative to typing passwords at all, and more platforms are adopting them every month. A passkey functions through an exchange of digital certificates between your device and the platform you're logging into. No biometric data ever leaves your device. No password is ever transmitted across the internet for someone to intercept. Most of the vulnerabilities people worry about with passkeys simply don't exist, given how the technology is actually built. The real practical limitation with passkeys right now is that they're tied to a specific device. Lose that device, wipe your operating system, or switch to new hardware. A small device you plug in or tap against your phone to authenticate, which works independently of any single piece of hardware and doesn't vanish the moment your phone breaks or gets lost. So let's bring all of this down to something you can actually go do today, not just something you nod along to and forget about by tomorrow. One brand new 6-word passphrase made entirely of random unconnected words, and use it to reset your email password immediately. Do the exact same thing for your bank and your Apple or Google account. if any of those platforms offer a hardware key or passkey option. Take the few minutes to set it up now, while you're already in the mindset. Sometime this week, build 3 separate forward passphrases. One for social media, one for streaming and gaming, one for shopping and general browsing. Go through your accounts category by category and update them, keeping each passphrase strictly inside its own bucket. And going forward, adopt one rule you never break, not even once. Never click a login link that arrives in an email or text you didn't ask for. If your bank sends you a notification, close that email entirely and navigate to your bank's website the way you always should, by typing the address yourself or using a bookmark you already trust. Do those 4 or 5 things, and you will have solved the actual problem. Not the imaginary supercomputer grinding through every possible combination of your password, because that was never really coming for you in the first place. The real problem, the leaked database sitting quietly in the dark, the reused password that let one small breach cascade into 20 compromised accounts, the phishing message that looked just convincing enough to click without thinking. You've addressed all of it, and you did it without memorizing 40 characters of random gibberish, without carrying around a password so complicated you had to write it on a sticky note just to remember it, without rebuilding your entire digital life around a system so exhausting you'd quietly abandon it within 2 weeks. Password complexity was never really the answer. It was a comfortable story, an easy one to sell, one that made people feel like they were solving a problem they never fully understood in the first place. The real problem is quieter and, honestly, a little scarier. Your password has probably already been exposed somewhere, sitting in a database you'll never see. The only real question left is whether that exposure opens one door or 20. Now you know exactly how to make sure the answer is none.